In the headlines, signs of a potential thaw in inter-Korean relations. After a North Korean delegation's visit to Seoul over the weekend, South Korea's president calls for regular inter-Korean talks. The South Korean government calls for more corporate investment. 16 conglomerates, including Samsung Electronics, announced plans to invest a total of more than 28 trillion won by the end of next year. And Hong Kong officials resume work as democracy protests calling for universal suffrage have thinned, with some reports saying there is a divide among activists on how and when to end the protests. Hello and welcome to the newscast coming to you live from Seoul. I am Kang Tae-ri. We start off with signs of a potential thaw in inter-Korean relations. After a high-ranking North Korean delegation's visit to Seoul over the weekend, South Korea is now calling for regular inter-Korean talks. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
As the two Koreas prepare for a fresh round of high-level talks, President Park Geun-hye on Monday called on the need for regular inter-Korean dialogue.
특히 이번 고위급 접촉이 단발성 대화에 그치지 않고 남북 대화의 정례화를 이루어 평화 통일의 길을 닦을 수 있도록 노력해야 할 것입니다.
Sending a high-level delegation to Seoul on Saturday, Pyongyang said it was ready to hold a second round of high-level talks with Seoul sometime later this month or in early November. South Korea said reuniting families separated by the Korean War will be on top of the agenda.
The issue of separated families certainly needs to be brought to the table by us. We are hoping to discuss a wide range of issues that are of interest to South and North Korea.
The surprise one-day visit has raised hopes of a new dynamic in inter-Korean ties. In Seoul for talks with senior officials and Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell extended Washington's support on the latest developments.
I made clear that as is a consistent element of U.S. policy, the U.S. supports the efforts on the part of the ROK to promote and enhance inter-Korean relations.
But President Park noted that inter-Korean ties have sometimes worsened following dialogue, implying it may be too early to judge North Korea's intentions. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Now, staying with North Korea, figuring out North Korea's intention has always been a tricky task. Its leader Kim Jong-un has said that the regime is not giving up its nuclear weapons, but could that be changing? A U.S.-based think tank says activity at North Korea's main Yongbyon nuclear complex has reduced significantly. Our Kwon-soo has the details.
Activity at North Korea's main nuclear site may have come to a partial or complete halt. Citing recent satellite imagery, the U.S.-based Institute for Science and International Security says a comparison of images made in August and September with earlier ones shows a lack of steam venting from the 5-megawatt reactor's turbine and a lack of water being discharged from its cooling system. The U.S. think tank says the reason for the shutdown is not clear, but it could be for refueling or renovation, raising concerns radioactive plutonium could be extracted during this process.
I think we can interpret the shutdown of this reactor and the recent visit to South Korea by a North Korean delegation as Pyongyang's intention to improve inter-Korean ties. But if the shutdown is for the purpose of extracting plutonium, then it will negatively affect North Korea-U.S. relations and the resumption of the six-party talks.
Nuclear tests have been conducted using plutonium produced at the Yongbyon reactor in previous years, including North Korea's most recent nuclear test in February of last year. A couple of months after that, Pyongyang said it would restart its aged reactor at the Yongbyon nuclear complex amid high regional tensions. The reactor had been shut down in 2007 under an Aid for Disarmament Accord. The think tank also reports that activity has been spotted in other parts of the nuclear site. Satellite imagery shows roofs being renovated at another plant on the south side of the site that's known to store centrifuges which are used to enrich uranium. But the institute added it wasn't sure whether the expansion of the centrifuges had been completed. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Two senior U.S. officials were in Seoul on this Monday to brief South Korea about the planned revision of the so-called USJapan defense guidelines. Following a meeting with Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell, and Assistant Secretary of Defense David Scheer said Washington will keep Seoul in the loop as talks progress. As a former victim of Japan's militaristic past, Seoul has expressed concerns about Japan's expanded military role under a revised bilateral defense cooperation deal.
This guidelines revision will not only strengthen U.S.-Japan relations, but it will strengthen peace and stability throughout the region. And of course, as this process unfolds, we're going to want to stay in close touch with our Korean partners on this. Thank you.
Russell and Scheer will meet with their Japanese counterparts in Tokyo on Tuesday, tomorrow, before they release an interim report of their defense guidelines sometime this week. One of many Koreans' guilty pleasures is street food, such as tteokbokki. And here's a business that's really taken out the street part of street food and has really taken off since then. And it's looking to take that premium street food onto the global stage. Shin Se-min tells us more.
It certainly looks different. It's not the spicy red gochujang-based paste tteokbokki that we're used to, and these miniature kimbaps called bari are different in their size, but they're tasty. And even though they come at a higher price than the traditional dish that inspired them, people dig them. Here, popular Korean street food, or punshik, is served with a high-end touch. School Food, a franchise Korean restaurant, is making money by offering an upscale version of Korean street food like kimbap or, say, tteokbokki in a spicy carbonara sauce.
I come here often because you can't get these type of tteokbokki elsewhere.
So I've tried school food before in Hong Kong, and I've been there twice, and that's why I would quite like to try the original restaurant in Seoul. It offers like fusion Korean food, which is very different to traditional Korean food.
Since starting out 12 years ago, the franchise has beefed up in size with 80 stores nationwide. Last year, School Food posted sales of $85 million.
This is a new type of Korean food. A twist to the already tasty Korean dish is what attracts both Korean and foreign diners. And people like that they can enjoy casual Korean food in a nice, clean restaurant.
And it's going global, with a total of 10 restaurants in places like Hong Kong, Jakarta, Bangkok, Hanoi, and Los Angeles.
You've come this far, and what's the toughest part of your job in expanding your business overseas? I mean, in the global market, school food is not yet well known. Is it going to be a tough road ahead?
Of course, it is a difficult road ahead, even with our dish. I mean, although this uniqueness gathers attention regardless of nationality, this will wear out, and people will get bored. But just as customers still pay visits to McDonald's and Starbucks over other stores, my ultimate goal is to establish the brand image in their minds so they come back years after.
Lee says he has been receiving a number of calls from people overseas who are interested in opening up school food restaurants abroad. And while that's something he welcomes over the long term, Lee says he first wants to tackle the Southeast Asian market, where the palates of diners are similar to those here in Korea. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world,
Join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8, every weeknight on Arirang TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. Korea's conglomerates have promised the commerce industry that they will move ahead with investment plans worth billions of dollars through the end of next year. The Korean government welcomed this move, of course, and said it would do all it can to foster a business-friendly environment. Kim Ji-yeon tells us more.
Cooperation between the Korean government and the country's conglomerates seemed to go hand in hand during hard economic times. In a gathering hosted by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, tech giant Samsung Electronics and 15 other companies agreed to make investments worth around $26.6 billion in total. This includes new investment projects slated for next year, but not the expenses for annual maintenance and development projects. Among the investment plans are Samsung's semiconductor plant line at the Pyeongtaek Industrial Complex in Gyeonggi-do Province, worth $14.6 billion. Samsung officials emphasize the importance of fostering a business-friendly environment for quick completion of the plan, which is currently slated for 2017. In response, Trade Minister Yoon Sang-jik says the government will facilitate a one-on-one consultation system to remove obstacles and help companies carry out their investment plans on schedule. In regard to the unfavorable currency conditions surrounding Japan's weakening yen, which is threatening Korean exporters, the minister says domestic companies should turn the situation into an opportunity to boost their facilities' investments. He adds that businesses should take full advantage of the currency exchange rates to increase investments, especially when it comes to machinery and plant assets from Japan, since the weakening yen makes it relatively cheaper to import Japanese products. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The central bank has laid out possible downside risk factors for Korea's economic recovery for the rest of this year. They include the Eurozone's economic slowdown and not yet bullish investor sentiment. But the riskiest element is a shortfall in tax revenue. Song Ji-sun has more.
Not meeting the government's goal of tax collection could be one of the major downside risks threatening the Korean economy. In a report submitted to National Assembly on Monday, the Bank of Korea said a shortfall in tax collection could hurt the economic recovery, along with external factors like slowing demand in the Eurozone. Ruling party lawmaker Bang Myung-jae, a member of the Assembly's Finance Committee, also expressed concerns the government collected less than half of its targeted tax revenue in the first 6 months of this year. That's the lowest collection rate in 16 years. Data from the National Tax Service shows tax revenue totaled $119 billion in the January to July period, a mere 58% of its goal. The government collected some $8 billion less than it had projected last year, and the Finance Ministry expects a similar shortfall this year as well. Lower than expected tax collection means the government must cut its expenditure unless it manages to issue bonds to fill the gap. That will deal a blow to the government's plan to boost much-needed economic activities at home. The central bank has already warned that the strength of the local currency and a lower-than-expected recovery in consumer and investor sentiment could slow economic growth. A member of the central bank's Monetary Policy Committee said the Finance Ministry might have been too optimistic when setting their tax revenue goal. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Over the foreign exchange counter, the Korean won dropped to a 6-month low against the U.S. dollar today. The won gave up a 7.61 against the greenback amid speculation of a potential rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve following recent strong jobs data. And against this backdrop of the strong dollar, the Japanese yen has been weakening at a much faster rate than the Korean won. According to the Korea Center for International Finance, over the last 3 months or so, the yen has dropped by 7.6% against the US dollar, while the won has given up just a little over 4%, meaning the yen has weakened by almost twice as much. Experts say this could deal a negative blow to Korean exporters who are losing price competitiveness to their Japanese rivals and prompt more foreign investors to leave the Korean equities markets. This year's Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine has jointly been awarded to John O'Keefe and May-Britt and Edvard Moser for discovering the brain's so-called inner GPS system, which helps people orient themselves. A ceremony was held on Monday in Stockholm to award these three scientists a total of $1.2 million in prize money. The Nobel Prize in Physics will be announced tomorrow, and the prize in Chemistry as well as the Peace Prize will be announced later this week. Prizes for economics and literature will be released in the coming weeks as well. And speaking of the Nobel Prize, an institute in Oslo forecast the war-renouncing article of the Japanese Constitution as the most likely candidate to win this year's Nobel Peace Prize. If that happens, it could put more pressure on Japan's Abe administration's right-wing nationalistic policies. Son Jang-in tells us more.
Each year, the Oslo Peace Research Institute forecasts the most likely winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, and this time it has selected Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution. The institute noted the article's renunciation of war and the use of force assume much greater importance amid military tensions in Ukraine and other parts of the world. The article renounces the right to engage in war and rejects the use of force as a means of settling international disputes. However, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's reinterpretation of the article in July caused protests to erupt in Japan. Against Abe's approach to allow for military expansion, Naomi Takasu, an ordinary housewife from Kanagawa Prefecture, initiated a campaign to highlight Article 9 in the Nobel Peace Prize election. After garnering more than 400,000 signatures, the Norwegian Nobel Committee tasked with picking the peace laureate accepted his recommendation to include Article 9 as a candidate in April. Among the other contenders this year are Pope Francis, Congolese gynecologist Denis Mukwege, and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. If Japanese peace activists clinch the prize, it will likely put intense pressure on the Abe government to step back from its military ambitions. The Nobel Peace Prize winner will be announced on Friday. Son Jang-in, Arirang News.
Hundreds of pro-democracy protesters remain on the streets of Hong Kong following the government's ultimatum to clear out or face action. And of course, Paul E. is joining us from the News Center with more. Paul, government officials there were able to peacefully return to work on this Monday after nearly a week of rallies which practically paralyzed the city. So is this the end of the so-called umbrella revolution?
Well, the deadline came and went without much of a fuss, leaving many wondering if the movement has run its course. Now, as you mentioned, some crowds are continuing their sit-in, but the streets look a lot emptier from the numbers a far cry from days ago. But activist leaders say they will not back down until Beijing allows free and fair elections in Hong Kong. Our Connie Kim reports.
Hundreds of pro-democracy protesters remain in the streets of Hong Kong as the government's Monday deadline has passed without any use of police force. Although the government deadline was ignored, civil servants were able to return to work. The chief executive of Hong Kong, Leung Chun-ying, took to the airwaves on Saturday, promising that public offices and schools would reopen this Monday, even if it meant using police to break up the protests. Protesters and government officials are trying to start dialogue, but they remain deeply at odds with one another. The student protesters want their leaders to be treated equally and for political change to emerge from talks. Government officials are calling for protesters to clear the way around government buildings and main roads. Rallies in the heart of Hong Kong started late last month with demonstrators demanding universal suffrage in 2017 elections and that Beijing abandon its plan to vet candidates for the post of chief executive. Connie Kim,
Arirang News.
And staying in Asia, Paul, the search for flight MH370 has resumed in the Indian Ocean nearly 7 months since the plane went missing on its way to Beijing. And of course, this is one of the biggest mysteries in modern aviation history, I would say. What does this resumption of probe mean? Are we any closer to unlocking its secrets?
Well, authorities say they hope this next phase in the mission will finally unveil the resting place of the Boeing 777, which has failed to turn up any trace following the months-long international search. The vessel Go Phoenix started underwater scans on Monday, about 1,800 kilometers off western Australia. The salvage ship, which was contracted by the Malaysian government, will be joined by 2 other state-of-the-art vessels later this month. The team is said to be using specialized equipment such as sonar scanners, echo sounders, and video cameras to scour the sea floor. The operation is expected to take up to a year as it focuses on a 60,000 square kilometer patch of the southern Indian Ocean. It's there where investigators believe the final wreckage of the passenger jet ended its journey based on satellite data. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 veered off course on March 8th after taking off from Kuala Lumpur while carrying nearly 240 people.
That's right. And the American Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps has announced that he will be taking a break from the sport, and looks like a good idea following his drunk driving arrest last week. And we saw him lose major sponsorships back in 2009 after he admitted to smoking marijuana. So how is he responding to this latest scandal?
Well, the 29-year-old athlete did not clarify how long this hiatus will be, but his agent said in a recent statement that Phelps is entering an inpatient program that will take 6 weeks. According to police in Baltimore, Phelps was pulled over after speeding through a tunnel and subsequently arrested after failing a breathalyzer test last week. It marks the second time he's been found driving under the influence of alcohol after pleading guilty in 2004. This incident also comes at a crucial point as he is apparently seeking a spot on the U.S. team for the 2016 Olympic Games. On Sunday, the world-class swimmer took to Twitter, apologizing to his fans and stating that he would take full responsibility for his actions. With 18 gold medals under his belt, Phelps is the most decorated Olympian of all time.
That kind of fame always comes with that much of a responsibility, right? And finally, the U.S. technology giant HP is reportedly planning to break up in 2 companies as it's trying to cope with the declining sales in the PC market. We don't really see PCs around anymore. So this is one of the biggest names in this industry, Paul. So how are they going to split this massive pie, so to speak?
Well, they're going to cut it right down the middle. Hewlett-Packard is said to be in talks to separate its consumer side of personal computers and printers from its corporate hardware and service operations. The story was first reported by the Wall Street Journal on Sunday, citing familiar sources with a plan that could be announced as early as Monday. If the split goes ahead, it would give the rise to 2 publicly traded companies by next year, each earning more than $50 billion in annual revenue. HP's chief executive Meg Whitman is reportedly behind the push as she attempts to reinvent the 75-year-old firm. It's all part of a larger trend among big companies looking to streamline their business amid a rising competition from smaller, more agile firms. The internet auction house eBay announced last week that it was spinning off PayPal, while Sony already sold off its Vaio laptop and desktop computer division earlier this year. Charity?
All right, it is getting tough out there. Thank you so much for those stories, Paul, and we'll see you back here, of course, in just about 2 hours.
Hope your week is off to a great start, everyone. Now, you don't want to miss out on taking a stroll today because we are enjoying beautiful autumn conditions throughout the country under partly cloudy skies. This afternoon, the mercury rose about 10 degrees compared to the morning. Now, the big gap in temperatures between the day and night continues, so a jacket will come in handy as you head home. Otherwise, the mountainous regions of Gangwon-do province could get to see the first frost of the season tomorrow. This lovely weather, perfect for soaking up some vitamin D, will stick around for a while, so make the most out of it while you can. On to Tuesday's readings. Seoul hits 22, Daegu and Busan 23. On to other regions. Jeju makes it to 22, Dokdo 19, Mangkümgang 12. That'll do it for Korea, and we leave you with the international weather.
And that will do it for this edition of Arirang News at 8. Thanks for watching, and I will see you back here in about 9 minutes or so. Join us then.